There are so many powerful characters in Marvel Rivals that can be incredibly difficult to win against consistently. That's why you need specific characters and strategies that can shut down even some of the most powerful characters in the game, and in this video, we're going to break down all of them. That's right, every single character. We're going to break down exactly how you can counter them so that you can have a very consistent win rate, a high win rate, and start your climb all the way to eternity and beyond. Now, if you want to improve, let me introduce you to the Marvel Rivals Academy. We offer 4 weekly classes from top-tier coaches that will help you learn anything from the fundamentals to advanced concepts to level up your game. Coach Scrims, where you play in an organized scrimmage against people of similar skill with communication forced, and afterwards, a coach will review your gameplay and give you tips and tricks on how you can further improve. We collaborate with many of the best players, streamers, and pros to offer special classes like with Cringe Alarm on how to get great with Peni Parker. There are so much that we have to offer, and there's 30 days of free coaching, so try it out risk-free in the links down below, and I can't wait to see you there. Now, we're going to do this in alphabetical order, and it should be timestamped down below so you can just jump to whatever character you want to shut down. But if you jump around, do me a solid and press that like and subscribe. Now, the first character is Adam Warlock, and this is a very powerful character right now, especially when played with the res composition with Mantis and Star-Lord, and Adam Warlock himself can be very difficult to deal with, notably 2 important factors, his Soul Bond and his Resurrect. First off, Soul Bond can be extremely frustrating if you're a diver because it's basically going to neutralize your entire effectiveness because you're just not going to be able to kill anything, and it can also deny ultimates like Magneto ultimate, keeping the Adam Warlock alive, and basically face tanking the ult and just still living. So how do you deal with this? Well, the most important thing is making sure that you try to bait it out pre-engagement or pre-ultimate. You don't want to ever try to ultimate into this. It can keep Adam and his team alive against a lot of powerful offensive ultimates. You would ideally like to play aggressive, bait it out first, communicate it to your team, and then engage with an ultimate. If you're a diver, you want to typically bait this out pre with a soft engagement where you're not trying to go all in. Bait it out, force it out, and leave, because remember, it has a 30-second cooldown, which is incredibly long. So this means that after you bait it out, Adam is a sitting duck for a very long time. So make sure that you're not just guessing that he doesn't have it, using or engaging too hard, and then you just get shut down completely. Now, the other thing you need to consider is his ultimate. Especially great Adams, what they'll start to do is they'll start to position on a very aggressive off angle somewhere adjacent to their team when their team is engaging in a fight. And then when their team dies, they're rezzing their team in a place that you cannot push and punish. This is what a good Adam player will consistently do. So it's a good idea for you to be tracking an Adam ultimate. And if you are in a fight that you start to win, I want you to consider where the Adam is positioned. Try to fight him, try to scout him. If you can flush him out back to his team pre-fight, or if you can push his position so that if he does resurrect, you're right there to punish it. This can absolutely be a game changer and deny his entire ult. Remember, people only resurrect at 100 HP. So if you have a follow-up ultimate of your own, you could sandbag or delay the use of it so you have it to use like when they resurrect. A great example of this would, like, if you're Thor, instead of dumping your ult into the neutral fight when the Adam is separated, you're ready to pivot onto the ultimate, then you have your ultimate to deny his resurrect once it goes through. Now, the next hero is Black Panther, a character that a lot of players struggle with dealing with. In the hands of someone that really knows what they're doing, Black Panther can kill you in the blink of an eye. So how do you deal with this character? Well, Black Panther has a lot of effective health. As he gets resets with his dash through his marks, he's going to be able to get a giant burst of health. So just damage alone, unless it's giant amounts of burst damage, aren't going to be necessarily enough to shut him down. He's incredibly weak, though, to crowd control. So there's a couple of characters that have a great matchup against Black Panther and can shut him down easier than others. Characters like Namor and Bucky, especially if Namor has the synergy with Luna, can slow him down immensely and prevent him from just going where he wants and doing what he wants. But it's important that you track this character. You're always kind of aware of where he's positioned, where he's set up. And I think it's really important that you change the way that you use a lot of your abilities when you're up against a character like Black Panther. As an example, let's say you're Namor. Against a lot of compositions, you could take a really aggressive off angle, throw down your squids, and try to poke the enemy backline or try to get some picks. But against Black Panther, oftentimes you would rather stay in your own backline and throw your squids in a position that look directly at your team, so it's not peeking the enemy team. The squids will not get destroyed, but they will also consistently contest your team and anyone that tries to engage onto your teammates. Now, the reason that this works only against characters like Black Panther and dive compositions is because divers in general, and we'll talk about this throughout the roster, have an uptime problem where, unlike a lot of characters, they're not doing anything when they're actively not going for a play. You know, if I am a Namor, right, I am still doing damage if I'm just standing in my backline. I'm still applying pressure. I'm still poking at the enemy team. When I'm Black Panther, I'm doing nothing unless I'm actively going in. So there's a huge downtime problem. This is true for almost every melee character, and this means that you do not have to be crazy hyper effective all the time. You just have to deny the moments when that person is trying to be effective, and you're gonna beat them over the course of the game because they are not able to be effective in all that downtime. So you're just trying to deny the tiny window of time that they're going in, and this means that you can sacrifice some of your offensive capabilities, your aggression, your playmaking to deny, because you're still going to be doing more than them. If you deny and you're not being as aggressive, you're still doing a lot more. Now, also, there's a lot of characters that just can't be dove. I think Cloak and Dagger is fairly good if they're being dove, especially if they're being played alongside something like a Rocket. Rocket is also basically immune to dive, very hard to kill with the dive composition, and even triple support with something like Adam can be amazing because you can deny dives with your soul bond, and you also get to play characters like Loki that are very good anti-dive as well with his totems, and Mantis and characters like Luna. You do have a skill shot that's very good against Black Panther if you can hit it, so there's ways that you can interrupt as long as you're ready for him. So there's a lot of little things here. There's a lot of ways to outplay a Black Panther. It's really all about finding out where he's coming from, thinking about his cycles of play, and finding ways that you can interrupt it with some sort of CC or stall ability, and you're going to be just fine against this character. The next character we got to talk about is Black Widow. I think this character can be an absolute menace in the right hands, especially if you're fighting from long sight lines. But the important thing to understand about Black Widow is that she's going to be crazy effective from the longest ranges, and you need to be very disciplined about when you're crossing into the open and when you're fighting her into the open. This is especially true when she's getting damage boosted by like a Mantis. She's just going to one-shot you in the middle of open space. So you don't really want to be fighting her unless you're in a range where you can actively threaten her consistently. Her shots are really difficult to hit, so if I'm like Namor, I'm definitely never going to fight her from anywhere outside of like 20 meters. I'm going to try to set myself in on an aggressive off angle. I'm going to try to close in the gap and put myself in a range where I'm threatening to her just as much as she's threatening to me. If I'm shooting her from really far away, poking her from across the map, it's only a matter of time until she kills me because the risk to reward factor is not there. And this is true for pretty much any character that would fight her because besides maybe Hawkeye, she has better effective range than anybody and especially reliable effective damage from range. Now, surprisingly, she's not completely dead in the close range either because she has mass crowd control that can really mess you up. But I do think that, like, in the 10-meter range, those shots become really difficult and she can't melee you or kick you and deny you. So, like, from 10 to 20 meters is, like, the best range to fight her in. And oftentimes, Black Widows will suffer from a consistency problem in their own play. It is very difficult to be consistent with her shots, especially when they're under pressure. So deny her free value when you're fighting her from distance, when you're not effective against her. Try to find situations to set up closer effective angles against her, and make sure that there's a clear distinction between going in and fighting and resetting with your team. You're not just poking from range, just basically being a bit greedy with your position, not respecting her enough. That's how a Black Widow will get a kill after a kill after a kill, and it's far too easy for her to do so. It's also really important to note her positioning. I think a Black Widow that's in a position that no one calls out and no one knows about, she can just get some really easy and free shots from an off angle. So the faster you know that someone's there, the easier it is to reposition so you don't just die for free. Next up is Captain America, and I think this character is actually pretty difficult to counter if you don't have the right composition. One of the things about Captain America is he can be incredibly hard to kill. He survives for so damn long, he can constantly keep himself alive while jumping around, and if he ever gets low, he can just retreat to a health pack or something along those lines. Now, of course, there are certain characters that can shut him down rather easy, or at least easier, things that want to directly brawl him or stun him. So characters like The Thing, characters like Bucky, for instance, even someone like Namor with slows, or in some cases, the Rocket team up, I would say, with Punisher can also just break his shield really quickly and burst him down with that shotgun. So there's a couple of characters that have a good matchup against him and can shut him down. Also Peni, I didn't mention Peni. But if you're playing compositions that can't stun him, he can be an absolute menace to deal with because he just constantly can stall cards, stall objectives, and he's really, really hard to clear off. So what is the actual solution to Cap? How do you deal with Cap? Well, I think Cap gets a lot of extra value because sometimes people are half focusing him and half not. So if you have communication, which you're not going to get a lot in ranked play, but there are times when Cap is legitimately killable, but only if enough of you shoot at this Cap. And there are other times when it feels like you're the only one shooting at the Cap, you're calling it, no one else is shooting at it, and Cap just gets away scot-free. I would say that there are some moments where your entire job is not necessarily to kill Cap. You're not trying to kill him, you're just trying to force him away. You're trying to break his shield, you're trying to get him low enough so that he runs away, and basically, more or less, you're trying to ignore him. We're going to talk about Jeff the Shark in a little while, but the idea here is that you're doing enough to Cap to force him off your team, force him off your backline. You're playing to peel and help each other, and mostly ignoring Cap because his damage is overall low, and when he cycles out, you're capable of going in and just, fighting as a 6v5. I think Cap has a problem where, in some ways, he wants people to all look at him. He wants people to all notice him. He wants to take on all the aggro. And if you don't have the means to kill him, you need to identify that your job is not to try to chase this Cap around, try to kill this Cap at all costs. Because guess what? You're not going to do it. You're not going to be able to, especially alone, even with someone else, depending on what characters you are. Most of the time, your entire job just comes around just forcing him away, cycling him away, creating that uptime problem that we talked about with Black Panther, where once he's cycling out and once he's out, once he's setting up again, he's just not doing anything. He doesn't do anything from range, so he really needs to be in and actively doing stuff or actively baiting attention in order to get value. That being said, this becomes especially powerful when the enemy goes something that utilizes the Cap's aggression, that applies damage to the Cap or increases his damage or helps use the fact that he's baiting out all these cooldowns to their advantage. So as an example, if they go like Cap Thor with the Black Panther with the full dive, now things get really frustrating. And I would say that in that situation, you almost always need to swap to things that can stun him or potentially stun the people that are going after you. I highly recommend characters like The Thing. I highly recommend characters like Namor. But basically, you want your character or your team to be pretty independent and capable of neutralizing dive. Another way to do this is with a triple support composition that's centered around both Adam and Loki. Adam, Warlock plus Loki, as long as you're coordinated with each other, cycling Soul Bond and then totems back into Soul Bond is just, it's a nightmare for divers. Like, it's actually a nightmare. It's really miserable because you're just surviving. You're infinite. You're unkillable over and over again. You rock, something like a Cloak and Dagger Adam Loki, and y'all are just not dying. Like, y'all just are not dying. Okay, anyways, let's talk about Cloak and Dagger next. It's an important one. And I don't necessarily think that Cloak and Dagger needs a crazy way to shut them down. They're not like dominating your games or taking over your games or anything like some of the characters that we talked about previously, but there are some notable things that you can play around and bait around if you want to shut down Cloak and Daggers even more so. So I think a really powerful thing that you can do is actually apply pressure and force them to fade early. Fade is on a 12-second cooldown, which is rather long, and if you can bait it out early and communicate it to your team, then Cloak and Dagger doesn't have a lot of ways to defend themselves. Really, you can press them and poke them and push them a lot, and especially when you have powerful ultimates, something like a Magneto ultimate or even just any ultimate in the game, if you can bait out Dark Teleport for your team, then it just makes it way easier for your team to go for a play. And I don't think enough people play in a way to bait this out and then communicate that it's baited. I think that's a really freaking big deal because there's so many free abilities and ultimates that are being denied just because of this when no one's really trying to bait it out, and it's actually not that difficult to bait out. There are also some characters that can give Cloak and Dagger a really hard time, particularly characters that can deny their ultimate. So Magneto's the obvious one. I would say with the speed of Cloak and Dagger ult, you're not always going to be able to get the cancel. So sometimes you're going to pop it. That Cloak and Dagger is going to dip around cover or around the corner. Keep in mind that you do get value when they do that because they're not helping their team. They're not spreading their ultimate across as much as they should. And then you could just try to hit someone else with the ultimate in those situations. So you force them to get less value, and then you still got some value with your ultimate. That could be fairly good. Another thing to consider is that depending on where a Cloak and Dagger is positioned, they're not always going to be able to help their team keep them alive against certain ultimates. So like if you're a Star-Lord, as an example, if the Cloak and Dagger is playing across from another support or another squishy like a DPS on the other side, the Cloak and Dagger, even if they ult right in response, they're not going to be able to reach it in time to stop you from killing at least one person. And if they waste a defensive ultimate, but you still get a kill with Star-Lord ultimate, that's a amazing trade. It's so good for you and your team. Also, if you're really good with a character like Hawkeye, they're going to pause in between every one of their dashes and their ultimates, so you can just one-shot them through their ultimate, which can be particularly powerful. And there are other ultimates that can still one-shot through ultimates, or a combination of ultimates that can one-shot through Cloak and Dagger ultimate. Someone like Strange can do it with the right combo. So there's a lot of ways to potentially shut down a Cloak and Dagger, and I also want to give you this advice against any defensive ultimates in the game. If you can force them to use it early, I really want you to consider backing up, giving space, and waiting it out. One of the biggest mistakes I see Cloak and Daggers make across all ranks is they want to just ult very quickly. They build up an ult, they want to just pop an ult and go in and use it aggressively. But it's okay to back up, back off the objective, give space, let people cap even 1 tick or 2 ticks on a point before you retake. Punish them for being too overly proactive with these defensive ultimates, because you didn't have to invest resources to deny it, right? If they just pop it in the neutral, you didn't use an ultimate, you didn't use anything. They're almost relying on you fighting in their ultimate and then dying in their ultimate for them to get value. So just trade time, trade resources like tick progress on an objective or space on a cart. Give that up and then retake with your ultimates, and they don't have you, or they don't have Cloak and Dagger ultimate to deny you. Now, we do got to talk about Doctor Strange, one of the most powerful tanks in the game. There is some notable weaknesses to Doctor Strange, and I think a lot of people are just losing to this character for free when they really shouldn't be. So the first thing is Doctor Strange does have finite resources in his shield, and I think it's actually worth the value to poke his shield and apply a lot of pressure to his shield in the neutral, especially if it forces him back, forces him to play passive. And I do want to make it clear that his shield is way different from Magneto's, where Magneto can absorb an infinite amount of damage and Strange just simply cannot. So characters like Punisher, as an example, especially with the Rocket team-up, can absolutely abuse Strange and force him to back up and off. And there are some ultimates, like namely Hela's ultimate, where you would like to break the shield prematurely before the Hela pops it, because he wants to fly up, he wants to deny a certain ultimate, and you would ideally want to poke him out. You want to make sure he doesn't have a shield to deny the Hela ultimate, and basically doing whatever you can to set up your DPS to have more effective ultimates. I would also say it's important to take note about specifically his flight cooldown. It is on a 15-second cooldown, and there are certain things that he can contest and do, and certain things he can't once he uses it. An example is like walling him off as Groot. Knowing when he has it and when he doesn't is a really good idea, and it's a good idea to track that cooldown in general. He's also going to try to utilize it in conjunction with his ultimate a lot of times, and this leads me to one of my biggest tips about Doctor Strange is around his ultimate. A very powerful ultimate that can wipe your entire team, kill your team through, defensive ultimates, depending on which ones they are. I do want to make it clear that it can be really telegraphed. And the lower in rank you are, the more telegraphed it is, and there are ways to shut it down. So the first one is Invisible Woman. A quick push away when he flies up can be a great way to shut it down. Another thing you can do is a character like Bucky, if you know he has ultimate and you know he's going to fly in, making sure that you save your hook and conserve it, because if he flies right at you, you actually do have time to hook it and completely cancel it. But keep in mind, when you do cancel an ultimate like this, you are going to give him 50%. So after another fight, he's going to have it right back. You need to constantly be ready to cancel it again and again. I do think that especially for certain supports like Luna, for instance, you need to be ready to respond to the sound of Eye of Agamotto with your ultimate. Because if he pops it on your entire team and you didn't press your ultimate, you're just going to get killed before you even have a chance to proc it. So pay attention. Keep in mind that he's going to have it, and keep in mind that he wants to use it. And keep in mind, he's going to try to be sneaky with it. He might hold on top of a door frame, or he might be somewhere sneaky above you. Stranges love to hide up in like a roof somewhere and float and wait for enemies to fall in, and then he drops on top of you. Now, Luna especially has 2 ways to shut down the ultimate, with her ultimate, and also you can freeze him. So there's double ways for you to deny a Strange, especially if you're constantly thinking about it. I think it's a really good ultimate for you to be tracking and thinking about throughout the game. Try to play in a game where you're thinking about where is Strange positioned, how is he going to use his ultimate. I need to save my slow in order to deny the ultimate. I've been VOD reviewing a lot of Luna players, and they'll just use their slows randomly, and they won't even think to save it to even try to deny a Strange ult. If you don't even have it, there's no way you're even going to attempt to try, right? So I really want you to conserve these cooldowns in that moment, just like if you're Bucky, you conserve that hook cooldown if you know he has it. Now, also, his portal is a big one. A lot of times, players will think they have a point and they have an objective, and the Strange will still be able to get back and touch. especially if you know the enemy team is going to be able to get back and portal back. This is the most important thing. Let's say you're about to cap an objective, or you're about to get the payload to an objective or whatever. I urge you immensely to leave the objective and spread. Create space, occupy high ground, occupy different angles off the cart. Way too many players will 4, 5, 6-man stack in one place on the cart only to all get ulted by Doctor Strange or someone else when they have all the advantage here. If you just spread out, take multiple angles, as people are funneling in, they have to take damage from multiple directions, deal with cooldowns from multiple directions. They can't hit you with their ultimates all at once. And I see way too many people just throw the game against the Doctor Strange portal that's entirely telegraphed when they have entirely enough time to touch the objective. You're setting yourself up to win the team fight, not giving yourself more people on the cart when it's clear that you're not going to be able to cap no matter what before the Strange is going to be able to portal in. Now, Groot is an absolute demon, a character that forces close range engagements, can wall off retreats, and is overall just a absolute powerhouse in the meta right now. A character that you have to be extremely careful about how you're crossing certain choke points off. You might think that you're safe, but you take one step out of a choke point and all of a sudden you're walled off and murdered by Groot. It's really important that you make sure that your team can actually commit through, or you gain some sort of huge advantage before you're crossing through certain choke points around the Groot. And ideally, you operate in spaces and areas where it's a lot harder for you to get boxed out. If the Groot has to use 2 walls to cut you off from your team, that's one thing. But if he has to use only 1 wall, then you're probably throwing. Because then he can double up on walls and make it so your teammates are just incapable of breaking the walls to get to you. I would say that good play against a Groot doesn't rely your team to constantly break walls instantly in order for you to live. Now, there are going to be some characters that are super good against Groot. Groot doesn't really have any game against flyers, as does a lot of characters. They don't have game against flyers. Mostly tanks don't have game against flyers. He's not going to be great against Wolverine. Wolverine feasts on him, but of course, Wolverine is going to be banned a giant percentage of the time. At the ranks that he's not able to be banned, Wolverine farms Groot a lot. You pull Groot out of position, you just farm him because Wolverine does damage based on max HP, and Groot has a lot of it. So yeah, Wolverine's going to farm the hell out of him over and over again. And then, you know, Bucky plus Punisher, these characters are great against him, especially with the Rocket team up. I think Punisher Rocket can be an absolute nightmare to deal with on Groot because it's going to break your walls, instantly shred you as well. So you have to be really, really safe and tight to a lot of different corners. Now, also, something that I think is a bit underrated against Groot, depending on the rank you're in, is that Groot is not great against characters and tanks and players that all want to use mobility. So, while he can be amazing against tanks like Magneto and Thing that want to fight on the front line, brawl on the front line, don't have a lot of verticality, when he goes up against characters like Psylocke and Star-Lord and Captain America and Thor, all of a sudden, he doesn't really get a crazy amount of value from his walls. He's going to use his walls to kind of cut off line of sight, but people can just jump over them, and Groot starts to struggle with all these angles and all these characters that are shooting him from all these directions. He doesn't have a lot of mobility himself, and he has no vertical mobility when it comes to trying to contest flyers or high ground or anything like that. So there are some core weaknesses to Groot's kit, and it's important to understand these weaknesses if you're up against him and just don't have a great answer. Sometimes you could be playing right into his hand. I would say Groot is a character that loves playing front to back, or when everyone is in front of him that he wants to fight and no one's to the sides of him or around him. The more angles you can create against Groot, the better and better you'll be up against him. Another thing that is really important is that you need to identify when Groot and another character have a combo. This means that you cannot play together. This means you need to split up and take multiple angles and kind of spread. And it also means that you would like to put additional pressure on the character that is going to try to follow up with Groot's ultimate. So if it's a Moon Knight or a Namor, ideally trying to target these players and make it so that they are in a really awkward situation where they either are going to die or they're not going to get a great ultimate off, can be really good to deny the combo. You basically mess up one half of it. Now, next row, we have Hawkeye. Hawkeye can be an absolute menace against players that have great aim. Like, great aim Hawkeyes could be a nightmare to deal with. Hawkeye is just going to constantly poke at you and constantly apply pressure and constantly get random pickoffs. But there's a couple of huge weaknesses to Hawkeye that enough people do not take advantage of. And so let's talk about them and how you could shut down a Hawkeye. So the first thing is, Hawkeye doesn't have a particularly strong ultimate compared to other DPS ultimates. Yes, he's going to output a lot of damage. Yes, he could potentially get some one-shots. They're still tied to his mechanical skill relatively if we're talking about headshots. And mostly you can kite this ultimate or you can press the Hawkeye and kill him. It's nowhere near the power level of ultimates like Star-Lord ultimate or Psylocke or even Hela, where they're guaranteed to bait out a defensive ultimate or they're guaranteed to kill somebody. It's not going to happen always on Hawkeye. And I think that that's important because he's really relying on the power of getting random pickoffs, right? That's what he wants is free shooting, free pickoffs, free basically fights that just don't progress, nothing happens, and he just gets a lot of value in what we call the neutral, which is a non-ultimate, non-pushed-in fight. Hawkeye gets a lot of free value there. So what you need to do against Hawkeye specifically is you need to find ways to force him off angles and pressure him directly. So if you're a character, like tanks especially, need to really pressure a Hawkeye. It's your job to pressure a Hawkeye as much as you can. Apply pressure when he's in aggressive angles, especially if you're a character like Magneto. You could walk up without risk of dying, and you could put damage into him to force him off the high ground or off an angle and basically pave the way for the rest of your team. It's really important that tanks do that, and a lot of tanks can do that. Almost any tank can do that, whether you're diving him directly like on Hulk or Venom, or whether you're poking him out like on a character like Magneto. You can typically force him away from an angle, like a free shooting angle. Now, other DPSs, you have a couple of options. You could try to duel him from range, like with a rival Hawkeye, or potentially even a Hela. But one of the things that I think is more reliable is just to dive him directly. Hawkeye doesn't want any characters right on top of him. He wants to be able to free shoot and free farm. So any character that is going to get all up in his face directly at him is going to have a favorable matchup against Hawkeye. And this includes every dive character in the game. Black Panther, this includes Captain America, this includes Iron Fist, this freaking includes Psylocke, even Star-Lord. There's a lot of characters that they get all up on Hawkeye and they fight him. But compositions that are weak to him are compositions that just want to poke forever. So if your composition is just standing there trying to generate support ultimates, this is one of the many reasons why Hawkeye is really good against triple support, because he doesn't get pressured enough. So I think that there's ways to interact with him better across all roles. Let's say you're playing two tanks, right? And you're playing Magneto Strange. They could be okay against him, but swap out one of those two with the Thor, and all of a sudden the Hawkeye has to play far more positionally safe, and he can't isolate anywhere. So you can take multiple angles on him and really pressure him when he's out of position. Let's say you're rocking two DPS, and one of you is, I don't know, freaking Moon Knight, and the other one of you is Namor. Yeah, you're not really being proactive enough off him. So let's swap out maybe the Moon Knight for a Psylocke, and now all of a sudden we're applying a lot more pressure against him from different ranges and, you know, adjacent ranges and even close ranges when he's isolated. Now for supports, I would really recommend that when your DPS are actively trying to go for the Hawkeye, trying to duel him, trying to fight him, the Hawkeye is not going to be able to look at you and them at the same time. So you want to find ways to either enable your tanks and DPS when they're engaging him, or make sure that you're applying damage to the Hawkeye simultaneous to the engage onto him, because he'll just die, fall over, and then you can move on to something else very, very quickly. Hawkeye could be as big of a liability as he is a carry, so keep that in mind. Now, the other sniper is Hela, and this character can be completely dominant in the right hands. I think Hela really scales crazy high with aim, and if you have really, really great aim, this character is an absolute nightmare. Not only can she just constantly apply pressure and get pickoffs, but her crowd control can deny things like Doctor Strange Portal and all kinds of ultimates as well. So you have to be extra careful about Hela. Specifically, you can't allow her to maintain positions where she gets constant free sightline looks at your team. And this is something that everyone can do, but basically you need to ping her position, call out where it is, and apply pressure to her whenever you can to deny her a free sightline. Basically, the longer that a Hela gets to exist in a position that gets oversight onto your supports and onto the rest of your team, the more likely she is to get a pick. It's kind of similar to what we talked about with Hawkeye. This is a character that needs to be flushed out and forced out of positions. And also, when she doesn't have her bird, it's very, very important that you communicate that. Hela's very weak in that time, and it's really important that she gets forced out and then pressured before she gets another bird. Keep in mind that every time the Hela has her bird, she's going to be taking a very aggressive position, and then when she doesn't, she might play with her team, play more passive, and there are still windows of time where she can get punished in that, but everyone needs to know when she has these cooldowns. Another thing that's important to track is know when she has her ultimate. There are certain things that you can do against her ultimate. I think the most important one is actually just focus it and shoot it down. one of the things that a support player can do here is sometimes it's your job to shoot down the Hela ult with your team, but oftentimes if you are not the one being shot at by the Hela, you just want to pocket the person that is shooting at the Hela. So as an example, let's say you have a Hela as well, and they are shooting at the Hela that is ulting. You don't want to be shooting at the Hela ult. You want to be pocketing the Hela on your team that is shooting at the ult if they are the target of said ultimate. So you can play in a position that doesn't even peek the Hela ult, and you're constantly healing the person that is getting shot by the Hela ult. The idea here is that it's not your job to kill the Hela ult necessarily. It's to prevent death from it while your team takes an aggressive peek at it. It's also just in general good to communicate whether or not it's even possible for y'all to poke it out or focus it or not. Hela ult can be as simple as, oh, it popped up, oh, it's gone. And it could be as complex as no one shoots at it and it kills your entire team because half of you are trying to fight it while half of you are hiding. Now, I do think that Hela has some hard matchups against characters that want to fight her from distance that are better than her from distance. So a character like Black Widow and Hawkeye, those characters are actually good against Hela because she cannot just poke for free and she has risk of death against a lot of these characters. And she also struggles against characters that want to jump all up on her. While she can outplay divers specifically, there are some divers that could give her trouble. I think Black Panther can be frustrating because he has a little too much health. Iron Fist can completely outplay her by denying her stun. And any mobility heavy tank can be a nightmare for her to deal with, from Hulk to Captain America, constantly on her, constantly forcing her out of position, constantly never allowing her to play isolated, which is what she wants to do. These are ways to shut down a Hela entirely. Now, the next character we have to talk about is Hulk. Hulk is still a strong character in the right hands. Yes, he doesn't dominate as much as he has in the past, but the character can contest isolated DPS, can even pin flyers, is really good at specifically targeting and forcing people out of position or punishing them, and his team bubble is still really, really good. Now, there's a couple of things that you should consider when going up against Hulk. I think notably, Hulk is a character that you want him to cycle at as fast as possible. He's going to jump in, he's going to get some slams, he's going to get some value. You ideally want to poke him and pressure him as much as you can, and then when he leaves, you can focus on something else. Similar to basically every dive character, the idea here is that when they're in, they're your focus and you're forcing them out. You're not necessarily killing them unless they overextend, but you are forcing them to cycle out and wait for their cooldown cycles because they're not really doing anything when they're not actively engaged, like we talked about with other divers and other characters that are close range. Now, one of the things that you have to be really mindful of is his exile. It can shut down a lot, including many of your ultimates. It can shut down a lot of your plays. It can basically punish you if you're slightly out of position, because he's going to exile you and then his team's going to push. So there's a couple of things. Number one, be cognizant of the exile. You know, when you're popping an ultimate, I got my freaking thing ult canceled the other day by a Hulk exiling me mid-ult. So you got to be really careful when they have it. And another thing that you need to note of is when a teammate gets exiled and they're slightly out of position, you want to be ready to support them immediately. This might be pushing up and shielding them out. This might be bubbling them. This might be healing them. This might be pushing forward and applying pressure. You don't want to get someone exiled as everyone's retreating and then kind of leave them high and dry as, you know, the rest of y'all back away and retreat, and that person just gets killed after the exile fades. Now, there are some characters that can be really annoying for Hulk. Characters that he can't really catch or do anything to. You know, Star-Lord can be annoying. Psylocke can be annoying. Things with hypermobility that he can't interact with can all be frustrating to deal with. Giant amounts of burst damage like a Rocket Punisher team up, and potentially mass amounts of CC like a Bucky freaking hooking you when you're trying to run away. All of this can be a nightmare for Hulk to deal with. Yes, he has outplay capabilities with good timing, but it's better to make the Hulk play better to shut you down than it is to allow the Hulk to just run rampant for free. Now, Human Torch can be a frustrating character, especially if he's being pocketed by something like Invisible Woman, constantly giving him shields and shields and shields midair. He's really hard to duel. There are a couple of solutions I have for you. Number one is respect his burst. So especially if there's fire groupings on the ground, a Human Torch is looking to set up a little combo on you where he slams into you and does a lot of damage. So you need to respect that and oftentimes be ready for him to do something like that. That's all important. Another thing is, I would say taking multiple angles on the Human Torch is very important. So multiple characters that could take different angles, you know, maybe a Namor and a Hela, y'all take different cross angles. So you have a good line of sight onto the Human Torch regardless of where he is, or you have a DPS that has the means to contest the Human Torch, like a Hela. That person gets enabled by your own support, whether it's a Mantis damage boost or an Invisible Woman pocket as well. This could be a great way to shut down Human Torch. There isn't a crazy amount of problems with Human Torch across all ranks. I really do think that there's a clear divide between characters that can deal with him and characters that can't. He does get a lot of value just by people playing in his fire areas, so you want to make sure to clear out of those ranges. And you also ideally want to play characters that can interact with him in some way. Surprisingly, there are some characters that can shut him down easier than others. I think Spiderman is particularly good at shutting down flyers, and he could do it when he's isolated, because while I do recommend characters like Psylocke and characters like Star-Lord against a flyer like Storm, who typically plays closer to the ground, Human Torch plays so high up that it could be a little bit harder for those characters to contest him at times, although when he slams down, he is uniquely vulnerable. Now, of course, I already referenced her, but Invisible Woman is next. This character in the right hands can be one of the most frustrating characters to play against because she's constantly pulling you out of position into her team. And I do think that you need to be really careful against an Invisible Woman when you're peeking over a high ground. Invisible Woman, if she pulls you off a high ground that you can't immediately cross back up, it could literally just mean you're dead. And she can also push you into pits and things like that. So you have to be very cognizant about where those positions are. And note that a good Invisible Woman is constantly looking to try to kind of get one over on you. And yeah, that's never fun. Another thing is when you're setting up ultimates or something like a Strange Ultimate, you need to be aware of this because she's looking to do it. She's looking to deny you. And even when you're trying to retake onto point as like a Strange through a portal, if she pushes you just enough back to where you can't touch, you're just going to lose the game because of it. Now, whenever you see an Invisible Woman has left her shield anywhere, I want you to shoot it. It doesn't matter if she left it in front or behind or anywhere no one's using it. Just shoot it, because when it's completely broken, it actually has a longer cooldown to come back. So it just decreases uptime. And I think a lot of Invisible Women just leave it out. They don't retreat it. So, you know, it's just easy to shoot and you're just going to make it so it just doesn't come back up, which could be a really big deal. Now, another thing is Invisible Woman's ultimate. One of the things about it that I think causes it to get more value than it really should is that sometimes people play in it and they can, and sometimes people play out of it, but it's important to try to keep up communication about being in there, what your needs are. Like if you're low in there as a tank and your teammates pop a defensive ultimate, they might not know that they can come save you. If you don't communicate and say, let's push in or let's pull back or try to communicate with your team, it's really hard to figure out what's going on. And sometimes you're winning a fight, even though they have an invisible ultimate, you know, you are still applying a lot of pressure. You're perfectly fine and comfortable in there, but you got to communicate that to your team. And there are other times where your team wants to help you, so they push themselves out of position to try to help you inside the Invisible Woman ult, but you don't really need help, and then they put themselves in danger. So the better communication regarding Invisible ult, the better your team's going to be, the less likely someone's going to feed. Now, of course, there is Iron Fist. This is my nemesis in ranked as the Thing player. I absolutely hate this character, but yeah, Iron Fist is very freaking strong in the right hands, and especially because of his ability to deny certain cooldowns, he can really be impossible to kill, it feels like. Now, there are going to be key moments where the Iron Fist is vulnerable, and I think the most important one comes from right when he decides to disengage. I know he's going to kick out and go pretty fast, but during that moment is typically the time that you want to press. When he wants to disengage, he wants to wait, he wants to get his cooldowns back, he wants to meditate, whatever, that's when you can press. And a lot of times, fighting an Iron Fist is about enduring his engagements. So you're just trying to neutralize him enough, force him out, and similar to what we talked about with Black Panther, you forced him out, he's no longer effective, now you push forward. Of course, high burst and high crowd control is going to be particularly good against Iron Fist, but it's not always enough if those things get neutralized. The more crowd control you have in a team composition, the better. So, you know, if you have a Bucky, plus a Namor, plus a Thing, like all these things combined, could definitely deny an Iron Fist, and I would say that the more CC you add in a composition, the harder and harder it becomes to deal with on Iron Fist. Now, I did say part of the way to beat Iron Fist is to force him to cycle out and kind of mitigate or diminish his impact while he's going in. This is even more so the case when he's popping his ultimate. He gets a million blocks and he's almost impossible to kill unless you can mass deny him, mass stun him, or whatever. He's gonna just constantly be going in after your team. So this typically requires the team to back up, give as much space as possible, and either pop defensive ults or just kind of turtle up where you're trying to constantly heal each other, constantly apply damage to the Iron Fist, and constantly keep each other alive just to basically endure. The idea is I'm going to endure this ultimate. I'm not necessarily going to be able to kill this Iron Fist, but I'm going to endure. We're going to survive. Once it's over, then we can press again. And yeah, that's really kind of the important part here. You're going to trade his ultimate for time. Unless you are committed to fighting it, then you either need a defensive ultimate or some way to turn the table, some powerful ultimate that is going to do more against the rest of their team. But one thing I'll say that when you're up against Iron Fist, the most important thing, especially for you support players, is to be calm under pressure. An Iron Fist oftentimes is playing a mini game with you in advance. So if you're Luna or your Mantis, the mini game is, can I block their cooldowns? Can I block the freeze? Can I block the sleep on Mantis? Once they do, they're no longer afraid, and they're just going to punch the hell out of you. So while it is your first reaction to, I'm going to pop this right away, that's what the Iron Fist is often playing for. And if they don't force you to proc it right away, then oftentimes they have to disengage. Now, this might mean you're going to take some extra damage. This might mean that you drop a little bit lower than you think you should, but it is important to do because the longer that you can kind of play this reverse chicken with this Iron Fist, the better you are at it, the harder and harder it's going to be because, you know, the second you pop your ability and they deny it, you've lost already. Now, Iron Man is a character that did receive a pretty sizable mid-season buff and actually is fairly strong even without Gamma, and with Gamma, he becomes even stronger, especially when Hulk is jumping on you 24/7 when you're trying to take an angle on the Iron Man. Now, basically, if you are not a person that can directly deal with Iron Man, let's say that you're a tank or a support and there's nothing that you can directly do to touch Iron Man at all, it's really important that you're constantly trying to enable someone who can actually shoot the Iron Man. So if that's your Spiderman, for instance, you want to be snowflaking him as he goes in and at the Iron Man. If it's your Hela, you want to be trying to go with them and create an off angle. I see way too many supports will constantly just be playing with their tank while an Iron Man is spamming from above, while their DPS is trying to get an angle on the Iron Man, but the DPS takes a little damage from Iron Man or whoever and then has to run away. Guess what? Pocketing the tank indefinitely is not going to deal with the Iron Man. Helping your DPS take that angle on the Iron Man is. So it's important to understand that this is like a mini game battle that if you're not even participating in, you're just no way you're going to win. I mean, you're just going to die to this Iron Man. You're going to be screaming, why did you never deal with them, while people are trying to deal with them. Now, there are certain characters that could deal with an Iron Man from the other roles. I think specifically from the supporting role, notably Adam Warlock is actually great against Iron Man. Just being able to dink him, apply a lot of pressure. You're harder to flush out than a DPS is because you can actually heal yourself. And then Soul Bond just makes it so you ignore Iron Man a lot. You can also survive things like an Iron Man ult with Soul Bond directly. Now, most tanks aren't going to be able to directly deal with the Iron Man. You also can output a lot of pressure. Putting Iron Man in a situation where he has to peel or try to deny is not great, considering Iron Man doesn't have any form of CC. He's not going to be able to really stop a dive. He can put in a lot of damage, but he's not going to be able to stun you, crowd control you, or prevent you from doing what you generally want to do as a tank. So as an example, if you're the Thing, you just can more or less ignore Iron Man and still just execute your primary game plan, and Iron Man's just not going to be able to burst you down. You do have to be like aware of him, but if he's spending all game trying to beam you down and then you're jumping out and living, he's just wasting his time. He's not a threat to your team, and if he completely ignores you, then you just get to kind of do whatever you want to do. So regardless, you win in that exchange. And as far as DPS that are the best at dealing with Iron Man, of course, hit scan DPS are going to be fantastic. Even characters like Namor with his 40-meter long squid range is going to be great. Other flyers can be good against Iron Man. Iron Mans can diff other Iron Mans. Storm can actually be reasonable against an Iron Man as well. But honestly, some of the best characters against a character like Iron Man is like Spider-Man, and even Iron Fist can be particularly good against an Iron Man as well. Characters that just kind of stick to you and don't allow you to run away. A good Iron Man is always going to be trying to move around, run away, and you're just not going to be able to get away against these characters. Now, a character a lot of people get upset by right now is Jeff the Land Shark, especially DPS Jeff the Land Shark. People just get really frustrated because he's constantly in your backline. He's constantly abusing everybody, just spitting out damage, and you just really can't do anything about him. If you try to chase him, he just runs away and he just doesn't die. But if you ignore him, he slowly just pieces you apart, and he can be really frustrating. So what can you do to deal with Jeff? How do you deal with Jeff? Well, similar to Captain America, actually, one of the big powers to Jeff, one of the big ways he gets value is by distracting you. Like, if you or two people are chasing around Jeff while your team is fighting, I promise you, you're losing that exchange immensely. Like, Jeff is more than happy for you to chase him around the map, and if you're playing into his game in that regard, it's really, really bad. But you're like, okay, Mills, I can't chase him, so what do? Typically, what you want to do is you want to do just enough to the Jeff to force him to kind of commit running away, and then go back to doing what you're doing. You're kind of just chasing him off, and then you're going back to what you're doing. And then once again, he pops up, you chase him off again, you put some damage, some pressure into him, and then you go ahead and you run away again. And this is kind of the cycle that you play with Jeff. Now, once you do this for a little while, the Jeff is going to get a bit overeager. And these are the moments where you can kind of punish a Jeff. This is the moment where you try to skill shot him with like a freeze on Luna Snow. This is the moment that you try to hook him on Bucky. This is the moment that you try to make a play that can stun him, counteract him, or overall kill him in these specific moments. That's what you're really looking for the Jeff to overbite, the Jeff to overextend. He gets a little bit kind of familiar with your play style, and then he's going to commit a little bit too hard, and that's when you have some cooldown, some amount of burst, something to turn the tables on that Jeff. And that's kind of the song and dance that you're playing here. It's kind of funny because this is similar to a concept that I used to teach in Valorant called conditioning people to a certain type of peak, where you're slightly peaking an angle over and over and over again, and then you wide swing out, their crosshair's not set, and then you actually kill them. It's like conditioning your opponent to do a certain thing, and it's conditioning this Jeff that you're gonna just put him, like, just chase him away and go back to doing your thing. And he thinks you're gonna do that over and over and over again because you show him that cycle, and then once he bites, then boom, you got him. Now, I'd also say that there's certain characters that can deal with Jeff a bit better. Like, Iron Fist is one of the best characters at punishing a Jeff because you can constantly punch him through the ground and he can't really run away. But another part about Jeff that people want to counterplay is his ultimate. He's gonna ult, he's gonna eat everybody. How do you deal with it? Number one, I want you to be aware of the fact that a Jeff has ultimate, so it's a good idea that if he's, like, lived for a while, if he hasn't ulted, he definitely has it. If you ever hear a Jeff ultimate, but you don't see it pop anywhere, he's definitely doing the tech where he's setting up and, like, he ults, but he's constantly falling, and then he can kind of trigger it whenever he wants, so you need to be a little bit aware that if you hear the sound, don't see the Jeff, he still has it ready. It's still going to happen, so don't feel like you're safe or whatever. Always save a cooldown, especially if you're a character that has the means to become crowd control, you know, immune. So this means that if you are a thing, you keep your pin. This means that if you're a Punisher, you're ready to whip into turret. This means that if you're a Magneto and you have an ultimate, you're ready to pop it. And that's one of the things that I think is super important. There's a lot of characters that have a direct anti-Jeff ult. So, you know, Magneto's really good. You pop it, you slam it onto the Jeff. Thor, same thing. You pop it, you slam it right on top of Jeff. Iron Man, you could do it as well. So there's a lot of these characters that can do it. But on the flip side, there are some other characters that you are making your team really vulnerable if you pop your ultimate without thinking about the Jeff ult. A great example of this is Invisible Woman. You pop your Invisible Woman ultimate when you know that they have Jeff ult. Now the Jeff is going to pop their ult and ult everyone inside your Invisible Woman ult. You're almost like setting them up, wrangling your team to get hit. So it's really important to kind of think about that before you ult. Think about what your other defensive ultimate is. Maybe they want to use that first. Maybe you want to wait and hold it back until the Jeff already ults, or you have a counter. A lot of different layers to think about here, but yeah, it's really important. Now, for Loki, I'm going to give you a lot of the same advice I gave you about Adam Warlock. His totems are just a very strong cooldown that is a very long cooldown. It's incredibly powerful, but you gotta bait it prematurely. So if you plan to dive, you plan to engage, you plan to make a play, even an ult play, it's in your best interest to bait out this cooldown first. Like, there's a lot of ultimates that can get just shut down. I mean, most ultimates can get shut down by totem. So it's really worth the time to pressure it out and force Loki to use it. Remember, it's also one of the primary ways that Loki can heal his team. So he will just often use it in the mid fight or when he's pressed. And this means that you could bait it out and then you can ult after the fact. This means that if you're a dive character, you do a soft dive, you bait it out, you call that it's baited out, and then you're ready to re-engage. You don't engage so hard that you're all-inning, because then, you know, the Loki will just totem you and then you'll just die for free. Now, in addition to that, unless you have some specific reason not to destroy his totems, like Bucky ult as an example, where you're getting resets off of it, you want to destroy as many of his totems as possible. He's getting so much free value across the map. His teams are being able to retreat to his totems and keep them alive. You need to destroy as many clones as possible. Destroy them, spend the time. They increase his damage and his healing and his overall totem powers, so it's just really important. Now, I generally think that Loki is fairly good against just about everything in the meta right now, even against Bucky, who has a really favored matchup against his clones right now. Still, you can play Loki against him, and you can do well with Loki, but Bucky is definitely going to individually farm him the most or get the most out of him in ranked play. I also think characters like Moon Knight can get some additional value against him. Characters like Star-Lord can get value against him by using his E and finding him when he runs away or goes invisible. And also characters like Storm that all have additional AoE. So these are all characters that I find reasonable against him. But one thing that I will say is because there's a slight delay between copy and popping an ultimate, and sometimes it can be hard to find that target. Unlike with other characters where, like, as an example, you fly in with Doctor Strange, you ult, and then the Luna pops ult in response and keeps everyone alive. Loki is going to have a lot harder of a time doing that. Now, granted, you have to bait out totems first, but if you do, you can typically catch a Loki before he has a chance to copy, and there's a risk that if he tries for it, he could get it canceled. So I think that that is an important window that not enough people take advantage of. They're kind of afraid that that's going to happen, and they don't recognize, hey, he can't do anything about this right now. The next is Luna Snow. Now, there's not a lot I could talk to you about specifically Luna Snow. She's a good all-around character that doesn't necessarily dominate a game, but there are a couple of important things that you should consider when playing against Luna Snow, and some key things that you can shut her down with. So, number one, you could ban her. No, I'm just kidding. Number one, you need to be a little careful of her freeze orb, especially if you're a character that can get their ultimate canceled. Whether you're the Thing, you're Doctor Strange, or any of the characters that want to engage really aggressively with their transform abilities. This could be Hulk, this could be Magik, this could even be Iron Fist. You do not want to get frozen and to waste a lot of that, or just get like 3, 2, 1 bursted down. That's really, really bad. But that being said, this is not the easiest thing to hit, and it doesn't help you against multiple forms of aggressors, so Luna can be rather weak to multiple sets of dives, characters jumping on her, applying pressure, and in fact, that's something that you can do to Lunas to force out their ultimates. A lot of Lunas will basically just pop it under any amount of pressure, so sending multiple people after her, diving her aggressively, can bait it out, then you wait it out, you back up, you give space, and then you retake after the fact. Don't fight in her ultimate, and if you're gonna match defensive ultimates with Luna Snow, you ideally want to wait as long as possible so that your ult lasts longer than theirs does, as long as possible after theirs ends, so you get additional value in the mid fight. Another thing that's super important is that there are some ultimates that can literally just kill a Luna Snow ultimate depending on the situation. If Magneto racks up enough damage absorbed, he can kill a Luna Snow pretty reliably. So there's going to be some moments like you absorb most of a Star-Lord ultimate or part of a Punisher ultimate and you just chuck it at the Luna Snow. It can actually be pretty powerful. There are some other ways to kill Luna Snow, like with Iron Man ultimate as well. And basically, anytime that you can trade an ultimate for a Luna Snow ultimate, it's a pretty net positive, assuming that you have another ultimate in the wings that is very good at getting consistent value. So as an example, if I'm Thor and I have a Star-Lord, I want to throw my body in there, put my dome out, pop my ultimate, bait out Luna Snow ult, and then afterwards my Star-Lord is free and clear. If I'm a freaking Thing, I'm popping it and I'm baiting it out. If I'm a, Black Panther, I'm going to go in really aggressive with the intent to try to bait out or force her to pop it early. The idea here is that I'm doing everything I can to force that Luna Snow's hand first so that it clears the way for my other DPS, and Luna Snow is especially one that you would like them to use first because it gives you the ability to back out, right? Like, let's say they have 2 defensive ultimates. You would much rather them start with Luna first, because if they start with the other one first, then the fight will progress and Luna's lasts a lot longer and it has more combo potential, so it's harder to kite away. Like, you bait out Invisible Woman ultimate, it's easier for you to win the fight against an Invisible Woman ult. It's also less likely to combo kill you in the mid fight. So if you back up away from that and then engage again and it's a Luna Snow ultimate, it's just a little bit worse off for you, in my opinion. I think you would rather bait the Luna Snow ultimate first, make them use that first, because then you can just completely disengage from the fight, and it's actually easier for you to outplay the Invisible Woman fight if you want to trade ultimates in that fight, as an example, because Luna Snow ultimate is so much more powerful with the combo potential. Next up is Magik, and Magik can be a really, really powerful brawler, dueler, and just an overall overall difficult character to deal with, but there are a couple of great ways to shut down a Magik player depending on what character you main. So first off, any anti-dive style of character is actually going to be good against Magik, not because Magik's necessarily diving, but because Magik has to get in close in order to be effective. So any mass form of crowd control, you know, a Bucky is going to be great, a Peni Parker is actually going to be great, a Thing. These are all great characters that are going to stun a Magik if they're out of position, that are going to kill them and just basically just force them to swap a giant majority of the time. I would say that these characters are so frustrating for Magik players. It's also reasonably important to track her cooldowns. Remember, she's not going to be able to portal indefinitely. After she uses 2 portals, she might be able to get her 3rd one pretty soon, but if she uses it right away, she's just not going to have anything after that. I would also say that High Ground is pretty powerful against Magik because she only has one way to go vertical, which is one of her combo enablers, the dash into the uppercut. So she doesn't really want to have to use that to take height, and then she's going to have to stage again. So even something simple like she sets up on height, you boop her off as Invisible Woman. Now she has to reset up or retry a combo from the low ground. It could just be really frustrating and difficult. So any high ground position makes it extra hard if you can just not position in the same level as her. It adds an extra layer of difficulty to Magik's overall setups and engages. Now, Darkchild is a really difficult one, kind of like cheaper Talent Hall with Iron Fist. It's just going to be a lot of pressure, a lot of damage, very difficult to kill, and really the only way that you're going to be able to kill a Magik during this is with extremely high burst damage, you know, something like a Hawkeye or a Hela headshot, or crowd control. And it's going to be a very difficult shot. I would say in the very moment after they portal, if you're not directly looking at them, they will try to go for a slash, or if they invest double portal back to back, then they will try to go for a play. It's going to be very hard to pull off, but of course, anything that can stop her or slow her down for a moment, Mantis, Sleep, Luna, Freeze combined with Team Focus Fire can be enough to potentially shut her down, but it's also an ultimate that is just very powerful when backed with pressure. I would say you want to typically back up, peel really heavily, and try to deny her as much as possible. Then you kind of pull back, give as much space as possible, and just really try to peel for each other, help each other, bail each other out before you push forward. It's almost like an all hands on deck situation where if you just decide that's not my problem, everyone kind of decides that she's going to kill one person, then the next, and the next, and then all y'all are going to just die and fall over. So it's not really a situation where you can do that unless, of course, you have an ultimate so big that it like out trades the enemy team, but that's typically if you're trading ultimates or doing something really proactive in their backline as well. Onto a tank next, it's Magneto, and Magneto is just a freaking all-star right now in the meta, just capable of enabling with his bubble, whether it's another tank like Venom or the Thing, or a diver. He's really good at bubbling for peel, and he just outputs a ton of damage. So how can you deal with Magneto? What are the best ways? Well, if he has his ultimate, this is a really important one because you need to be very aware of his ultimate as a tank, especially if you're a shield tank. So both Strange and Magneto, you can either bubble somebody or you can shield it off yourself. Trying to position in a place where your team kind of gathers to you and then you shield them off could be really good to keep them alive, and it's something that you should be trying to do each and every time if you can. In addition to that, I would say that if you are a character that has an ultimate that can get denied by Magneto and thrown back into you, let's say you're like the Punisher, you cannot pop your ultimate when Magneto has his, because he's just going to prime it and then throw it back at you unless you set up an Invisible Woman shield or a Magneto bubble. Like, you need to set up one of those two things, or, you know, in some cases you could even set up like a Hulk bubble or something like that. But for the most part, if you're not premeditating something, you would rather the Magneto just never use and you never use, because the reality of it is, the second you pop it, you're just gonna die, and they're gonna, like, both of y'all are gonna use your ultimates, but you're gonna be dead. It's just not a great trade from you. Now, in a similar way, some ultimates like Star-Lord ult, you really don't want to have to trade with Magneto ult if you can help it. Like, you don't want Magneto ult to take the place of a defensive ult. If you're Star-Lord, you would much rather bait out a Luna Snow ultimate than a Magneto ultimate if you can. But let me talk about some direct counters to Magneto. Specifically, let's talk about the Thing, who's just insane against double shield and shields in general. Being able to swing through shields is amazing, and any Magneto strange composition gets completely feasted on by the Thing. Being able to farm his ultimate over and over, just swinging into them again and again. On top of that, characters like Groot are really good against Magneto because Magneto doesn't have any form of mobility, so if he gets walled off, if he's out of position, especially if he doesn't have his bubble and gets walled off, he's just gonna get pushed and killed, so that can be frustrating ability from the Magneto, but unlike like a Strange that has a flight to get over the wall, or some other characters that can actually just fly over the wall, jump over the wall, Magneto cannot, and that's why Groot is so damn good against him. And this also applies to any character that wants to just take him slightly out of position, like a Thor as well. He doesn't really like getting displaced. And this technically also includes like a pull from Invisible Woman. Like one pull could bait out his bubble. I mean, bubble is such a powerful cooldown that can deny abilities and ultimates. So using an ability to bait it out is actually worth it in a lot of cases. It can keep people alive through entire powerful ultimates, so it's really important. Now, one thing I'll say is his shield actually absorbs any amount of damage. Like Magneto's shield doesn't last for very long, but it can absorb any amount of damage. So this means it can eat Iron Man ultimates. It can eat freaking Punisher shotguns. It also can just like eat an Ankh if you throw an Ankh into it as Moon Knight. So that's an important interaction to understand. It doesn't matter how much you spam into it. You're not doing anything. So if he procs it up, you wait it out, and then you kind of engage after the fact or use your abilities after the fact. Next up in the M's is Mantis, a character that is just really good, especially with the Atom team up, can be amazing, can get resurrected and just get a lot of value. Her sleep is also really easy to hit, so any diver or any close range tank is going to get put to sleep a lot. And that gives you my first tip is, if you see someone sleeping, you wake them the hell up. And I think, especially if you're pushing Mantis, it's better to push her in duos just so that you can awaken each other. She can't sleep you both, so being able to just quickly wake your teammate up, go after her, or just go after her and finish her off. If you push her and get slept, a lot of times because of her burst, she could actually just turn the tables on you and kill you. So it can be a liability for divers to even engage her alone, unless you're coming out from a really unexpected angle very quickly. But one thing I'll say is that her ultimate isn't something that makes her invincible. I really do think that Mantises get overly aggressive with their ultimate when they can still get killed by a Magneto ult. They can still get bursted out just afterwards with a Doctor Strange ultimate, when they can really still get farmed by a Psylocke ultimate solo. If she doesn't have anyone with her, she'll actually still die, even in her ultimate, to a Psylocke ultimate. So there's a lot of ways to shut her down and counter her, and that's not even including combining with damage boost or something like that. Like an amplifier plus any form of aggression from a team, you can just burst a Mantis down even in her ultimate. It's an ultimate that is not good enough to be purely defensive against a lot of different types of ability combos and burst abilities. So yeah, that's one of the core weaknesses of this character. Depending on what ultimate you have, you can set it up to kill their team and her through the ultimate. And especially if you have any form of like mass crowd control, like a Groot ultimate or a Thing ultimate, you could almost undoubtedly still burst her and her team through her ultimate. Also, I would really be careful of the Atom, Rez, Star-Lord synergy in general with Mantis. Just oftentimes you're winning a fight, you think you're gonna win that fight, but then a whole bunch of people mass Rez at the same time and it flips. So be extra careful about this. It's a good idea to know what character have used their Rez and what characters haven't, and especially if all three of them have their Rez still available. The fight isn't over yet, so make sure that you're kind of keeping track of that when you do your internal calculations about advantage, disadvantage. Now, next up is Mr. Fantastic. I don't really have any crazy specific tips against Mr. Fantastic for you. I will say what he's good against. He's good against double shield because he can deal damage through the shield. He's actually pretty reasonable against that. And he's good against dive because he's really good at denying dive and gripping dive, and he's hard to kill himself. So those are the two situations that he's really good in. But other than that, he does really struggle. His ultimate's pretty weak, and he doesn't fight very well outside of rather close ranges. So yeah, I mean, right now in his current state, I can't give you a ton of counter tips to him because I don't necessarily think he's the character that deserves counters. But I will say overall that there's a certain time frame that he's most vulnerable, and it's after his cycles of abilities when he uses his big body form and he's invincible, and then there's a window of time afterwards where he's not big. So typically he'll deal damage, he'll get big, he'll swing in, then afterwards he'll go big body and he'll absorb. Before he gets his next big, that's when he's most vulnerable. That's the cycle that you need to punish him in. If you don't punish him there, then he's going to get big again, and then he's going to get his big body again. So you have to punish him during that cycle. But as long as you know that cycle, that's like the specific vulnerable point where you save your cooldowns, you hit him with them then, and then easy clap. Next up is Moon Knight, a character that I do think is rather weak in this season, but still has some really strong situations. Let's talk about what those situations are and how to shut him down. So Moon Knight thrives the most when there's nothing directly coming after him. Like, Moon Knight really loses to any DPS that wants to fight him because the way that he moves is really slow. Whether he's grappling or whether he's double jumping and flying through the air, he's easy to shoot, easy to chase down. But he really thrives when he's up against poke, long distance spam, into people that don't really, engage him directly. So triple support, people that want to fight from range. These are the things that Moon Knight really feasts upon. So if you want to beat a Moon Knight, what you need to do is you need to play characters that will come to him and fight him directly. There are tanks that do this. Tanks like Cap, tanks like Thor. They jump on him directly. They don't let him do what he wants to do. Even Venom can be reasonable in that regard. Now, for DPS, there's a ton. Whether it's Psylocke, whether it's Star-Lord, whether it's freaking Spiderman, whether it's Iron Fist. I mean, every DPS that wants to fight him will typically win the one-on-one fight with him in like a reasonably close range. He just doesn't have the means to fight back very reliably if y'all are both of equal skill. Now, if the Moon Knight ever places an Onk, just do yourself and the team a favor, turn around and shoot it. He doesn't have it all the time. Just break the damn Onk, and you're going to minimize his value. If you allow that Moon Knight to just free farm non-stop with his Onks, I mean, you're just tossing the game. I don't care if you're a support, a DPS, or whoever. Break the damn Onks. Now, next is Namor. This is a character that I would highly recommend banning Luna Snow for. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, Namor team up, very, very strong. And especially when Namor does have that team up, he's a menace to dive. Those slow squids are going to really deny your dive a lot. So there's a couple of ways that you can set up favorable advantages against Namor. I would say, first off, destroy your squids at all possible and do whatever you can from any role to bait out his vortex, his sphere, and tell your team. If you can bait that out, he becomes far more vulnerable. I do think that it's really important to understand that Namor kind of has these cycles where he goes in really, really aggressive and he plays a really aggressive off angle or position, and then he gets bailed out by that orb, and then he can just get healed out and whatever. But when he doesn't have it, it's on a rather long cooldown, so it's important to communicate that to your team. Another thing that's important is just to communicate in general when Namor is flanking and off-angling and things like that. I find it way too common that a Namor will kill a whole bunch of people before anyone on the front line realizes it, because that Namor just kind of, flanks behind, drops two squids, right-clicks somebody, and then everyone's dead in the back line. So that's really important to play around and kind of take note of. Now, while Namor is really good up against dive characters or characters with mobility, there are some characters that just have really good matchups against him. I would say Bucky is like fine against him, capable of destroying squids, and just in general they both fight at about the same distances most of the time. But if the Namor ever gets too aggressive on an off angle, Bucky can kind of chase him off, and he's not as vulnerable to getting surprise attacked by Namor because he has so much additional health with the use of his abilities. Now, characters that can outrange Namor, characters like Hawkeye and Hela, are also really threatening to him because they can just potentially 2-tap him, 1-tap him, and just force him out of these positions. They just are more effective from range, so they're just trading damage at a much more favorable rate than the Namor himself. And then I do think that joint dives can actually be reasonable up against Namor. Like, going in as a diver alone is a nightmare, but if Namor's the only anti-dive that they have on the enemy team, jumping in with a freaking Venom and a Black Panther and a Spiderman, the squids are not going to be able to shoot everybody. They're not going to be able to slow everybody. And in addition to that, Namor shouldn't necessarily be your target because he has his orb. You want to just try to get value on the other people and then just kill them even in spite of the Namor. Ignore the Namor for the most part until after you cleaned up their supports. Peni freaking Parker, a character that in the hands of someone that's not very good is not threatening at all, but when they get better and better and better, this character could be an absolute menace. First off, I need you to recognize when it's your job to destroy the generator. Remember, pennies want to build up a ton of the freaking little nanobots on the generator. So if you're a character that could take an angle from that generator and destroy it, like a Psylocke, for instance, you should do whatever you can to, destroy that generator so your team aren't victims to it. Also, if you ever see like a random spider net anywhere, you need to be extra careful about traps hiding and, just do damage to them. Try to clear them as much as possible. You're not going to always be able to find every single insta-kill spot, but there are some spots that if you just don't clear, you walk over it, you're just going to really die. And especially if a Peni is playing in your back line or like in an off angle towards your back line, keep in mind that some Pennies like to set up mine traps on the angles or the lanes that you're going to retreat to, right? So you're fighting on the front line, they'll set up mine traps behind you, and the second you walk back into them, you die. So it's just kind of important to note that, like, A good Peni is not just there for no reason. They're doing something. So just, keep your head on the swivel, be a little bit more aware, and just aware that they're going to do this, and it'll be harder for you to get, just immediately destroyed by a Peni. Also, the grip is something that's just very good as a hard CC to deny so much, whether it's a strange ult or portal. And if they're trying to portal, if you're trying to portal, you need a body block for your strange. Don't allow your strange to get gripped up by a Spiderman or a Peni Parker or whatever. And you just need to be really aware that if she has line of sight of you, she can stop so many ultimates, especially tank ultimates. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten gripped up as the thing. So yeah, very powerful character in the right hands. But at times she will isolate her frontline tank where they could get abused a bit more. And her ultimate is a bit lacking compared to the many powerful ultimates in the tanking department. So those are some ways that she loses out overall throughout the course of a game that I think you could capitalize on. Now next for Psylocke, this is a character that could be a demon in the right hand. So let's talk about some ways to deal with Psylocke and some characters that shuts her down. So first off, let's talk about just her ultimate in general. Very, very good ultimate at clearing up people and killing people. There are ways to neutralize it. You whip up a barrier, like a strange barrier, it will get targeted, so it will actually minimize the effect. Same thing with squids. You can throw some squids out, and it will be some of the things that are targeted during the ultimate, make it less likely to kill people. Now, one of the hard parts with it is sometimes you can actually all stand together and endure it, but it's hard to make that call sometimes. And it's also hard to trust your team sometimes. So if you have, a duo or a trio or whatever, it's easier to do this. In a random squad of people, sometimes you try and then all of you die. So it's a little bit important to at least try to communicate and then make that call yourself, whether it's reasonable or not. Now, something else about Psylocke that I would say is that if you can bait out her cycles, it makes it a lot easier. She pops the invis and you hear it. Just be ready. Wait for her to pop out. Wait for her to reveal herself. Be ready to help peel. Be ready to deal damage to her or heal a teammate that needs it. And then if she just wanted to cycle out or doesn't engage or just looks at you and just oh, they're aware, I'm not going to pop in, you baited out the invis, you make it a lot easier for you to interact with her. In addition to all these things, characters that have mass amounts of bursts are going to be really good against Psylocke. I think that is pretty kind of consistent and par for the course, but, characters like Bucky, once again, anything that can stun her and can get her out of your backline or punish her for, overstaying her welcome is going to be generally pretty good against her. And then when she uses a lot of her dashes and stuff and hasn't traded a lot of damage, she's going to be pretty low on cooldowns, and you're going to be able to punish that as well. I think a Psylocke that doesn't engage well enough and doesn't get value during their engage, they're really vulnerable during their disengage. So Psylocke that doesn't kind of understand their limits is pretty prime for you to punish after the fact. Now, I will say that something about Psylocke, especially as you climb the skill ladder, is that Psylocke is just really, really good at isolated engagements. It's not an engagement that I would recommend taking, a duel that I would recommend it taking, especially if she has her cooldowns. Doesn't really matter what character you are. Psylocke can either keep their distance and fight you to constantly build ultimate, or they can burst you down out of nowhere, or they can disengage if they ever start losing. So it's a lot easier for you to interrupt her engage when you're with your team. So it's a character that's just better to play near your teammates and fight her near your teammates. If you're a Bucky, don't chase her around the map and try to force a 1v1. Instead, try to force her to fight you in front of your support, or force her to fight your support in front of you, right? That's the idea here. Now, Rocket frickin' Raccoon, this cheeky little bastard. Now, if his teleport spots are something that if you're a character with any amount of mobility, like Psylocke, for instance, you want to go hunt it down. And a good rocket will kind of take it down and replace it, but it's still a good idea for you to try to find it and do as much damage as possible. The more damage you do to it, the longer the cooldown will be. If you can find it and clear it, sometimes there's, the little armor packs that are kind of like little breadcrumbs to find it, but you ideally want to deal with it first before you go and engage, if you can, if you're one of these mobility heavy characters. During your setup as Psylocke getting to the backline or whatever, you can find it, and then after that, you can go make a play, so you don't have to, kill someone twice or whatever the case may be, or they trade, you trade, but then they're up one. So that's something that's pretty important. Now, Rocket in general is going to be really good against dive. He's going to just be allowed to just run around, and he's really hard to kill. but he's not great against burst amounts of damage from range. I think Hawkeye could be really annoying for him. Characters like Hela can be a nightmare for him. Just dink, dink over and over again, and he can't really interact. Those characters are just really, really good against him overall. And in addition to that, he doesn't have a defensive ultimate. And while that's not the end of the world, if you are running a team composition with multiple powerful offensive ultimates that are like almost guaranteed value, it becomes really difficult to play Rocket. So as an example, let's say you're running like Storm Psylocke, Storm Star-Lord or something like that. Now, you use one of your ultimates to bait out the Lunar Hole and then the second one to kill after the fact. The Rocket is going to pop his amplifier aggressively. You can just reset or back off or give space or whatever. And then, they just don't have anything to stop you. Especially if you clear out that freaking respawn beacon, then you're just going to be winning fights. And it's just about being disciplined in that regard. And, doing that appropriately. Now, if you're in a coordinated setting or, you're playing with a duo or trio or whatever, you could actually burst down his amplifier rather easy, especially if you have some other amount of high burst damage. So, like, if you have your own Rocket Punisher, you can destroy his amplifier, like, mad quick. It actually dies very, very quick. Just break it and then move forward. Otherwise, I want you to back up, give space. Don't necessarily fight an enemy in it, especially in this meta right now. There's so many combos with Rocket's amplifier that can kill through defensive ultimates. I don't really even think it's worth it to consistently try to trade your defensive ultimate to keep fighting in an amplifier. You're just going to get Magneto ulted or whatever and just die, or Namor ulted with the amplifier and just die. It's not even worth doing that most of the time. You typically want to disengage unless you have some other offensive ultimate that can really change the fight, but it's a tough call to make. I think it's better to reset most of the time. The next is Scarlet Witch, a character that I actually think has some pretty powerful use cases, and I think it's important to understand what those are so you can shut her down. So she's actually really good against dive, hypermobility, anything that's running around the map. She's good at it because you can't really burst her down or chase her, and she's just good at just constantly floating above you, constantly tracking you. So anything that's trying to be mobility heavy, go in, and Scarlet Witch can be a really good fold to that. It's also important to note that her constant stun circle can stun you out of something like a Doctor Strange portal or something along those lines. So you got to be extra careful around that. Scarlet Witches can set up and deny that if they're ready. Now, one of the most powerful things about Scarlet Witch is her ultimate. While it's not that great, just used randomly, you could deny it. There's a couple of combos that make it extra potent. I think the first one is Magneto Bubble. If they have Magneto Bubble plus that, you can't always break it and destroy her, but sometimes you have to be extra aware if they start doing that consistently and reliably. Magneto Scarlet Witch with the synergy there, that's going to be a pretty common combo, so you got to be pretty careful about that. And sometimes you really need to still have your shield, line of sight, use walls. Don't just rely on being able to kill her to survive her, or you're just gonna die over and over again. Another thing that's important is that when a strange portals, you're not going to be able to hear the Scarlet Witch ult on the other side. They could pop it on the other side and then pop through the portal, and you won't hear it. So out of nowhere, you'll just, see a portal open and die. And that can happen often. So if they have a Scarlet Witch and they portal, you need to be extra aware of that as well. A combo that is super powerful when used well, because it's just really, really hard to outplay. As far as characters that are good against her, anything that can burst her down or stun her, I think a lot of the support cast is just really good against her, because if they hit a stun on her, she just dies, and they can just more or less ignore what she's doing. Triple support can be particularly good against her as well. I think characters like Mantis can be great against her, and then any character that can apply a large amount of burst damage out of nowhere where she just doesn't have the time to fade it. Namor doesn't really care about her all that much. Characters like Bucky, of course, don't care about her. Characters like Hela, if they're mechanically decent, they don't care about her. And then a lot of tanks don't generally care about her either. They can press her, they can push her, they can force her to use her cooldowns. So this includes tanks like Thor, I think are particularly good against her. Well, we've entered the Spider-Man menace. I really was surprised to note that Spider-Man is dominating a lot of ranks, and a lot of people want answers to how to deal with Spider-Man. And I do have a how to counter dive video coming soon. It's going to be a lot more in depth about how to counter a dive comp and dive characters. But let's talk about Spider-Man specifically for a second. This character can pull you off the map and is really, really good at doing that. I think it's important that you are always aware of a potential Spider-Man. Like, if you turn your brain off at the start of the game and walk out of spawn and get pulled off the map, that's on you. Don't turn your brain off ever. Identify if they have a Spider-Man. Make sure that they don't or do have a Spider-Man first. before you just walk around and just, act invincible, because you're just not. You're really just not. Now, Spider-Man is a character that's really all about uptime, similar to other divers, where he's not really doing a lot besides his engagements. So your primary goal with his engagements is just to live them, force him off them, and stay alive. Like, killing him can be great too, but Spider-Man doesn't get penalized for dying nearly as much as other characters because he can be back to the fight much quicker. Mostly, you're just trying to kind of sustain through an engagement from Spider-Man, help each other, heal each other, defend each other, and force the Spider-Man away. This could mean, giving a wall to your support as Invisible Woman, pushing them off. This could mean snowflaking your other support and healing each other, or trying to heal your other DPS and keep all of y'all alive. And the ways to counter Spider-Man, I really think there's an easy mode and a hard mode. And it really depends on how good the Spider-Man is and how good you are. So let's talk about, let's say the Spider-Man's a really good Spider-Man. They have a pretty high success rate with combo killing and engaging and, pulling off plays, right? What's the easy mode to shut him down and the hard mode? So the easy mode is characters that, just deny all the divers. We talked about them a million times, whether that's freaking Bucky, surprise, surprise, or it's Namor with the synergy. These characters are really good against dive. Another character that's actually really good against dive is Star-Lord, being able to E people, being able to flip any type of uppercut. He can't really be the target, so he's good generally against a lot of divers, so he's going to be fairly good. These are the more easy mode characters. And then also, like in triple support, I think Soul Bond from Adam Warlock is really particularly good, and even Loki can be good. So all the same dive, anti-dive stuff are going to be good. Scarlet Witch as well. These are all anti-dive things that can be good. The Thing struggles a little bit more against Spider-Man than other characters because he doesn't stun on the ground. Spider-Man's typically a little bit too far up compared to a Black Panther, so he struggles. I do want to give a little bit of an extra shout out to Bucky, though. I know that he's just good against so many different things, but Spider-Man in particular, being able to hook him out of his ultimate and cancel it, or being able to just, if he gets uppercutted, he just, stuns him right back. You just are never going to have a problem with this matchup. So if you're underneath the ranks that there's bans and, you can just play Bucky whenever you want, don't lose to Spider-Man, just play Bucky. I'm telling you, you're just going to shut him down a lot. Now, surprisingly, characters like Peni Parker are good against Spider-Man, just being able to constantly grip him over and over and over again. Turns out, that's pretty freaking good. And actually, Magneto, being able to bubble the uppercutted person and then, right-click or stun the Spider-Man, that all can be reasonable. Now, that's the kind of easy mode way to deal with Spider-Man. The harder way is with skill shots that can just shut him down. I think Hela is just actually good against Spider-Man in a lot of cases, mainly because Hela's can just, stun him when he's close and just kill him when he tries to disengage. There's very few characters that when Spider-Man is just yeeting away at Mach 10, he could just die. Hela's one of them. Now, granted, you need good aim, but a good aim Hela would just deny a Spider-Man over and over again. Now, it becomes really difficult if it's Spider-Man, Venom, and all the divers, the whole squad. But if it's just a Spider-Man that's different, you just have to force him to disengage and then punish his disengage. Easier said than done, but I thought I would put that in there because it is possible to do so in the right hands. But next up is Squirrel Girl, another character that people have been having trouble with because Squirrel Girl just, provides so much damage. They can double stun tanks and all that. So let's talk about some counters to Squirrel Girl and ways to deal with her. For one, if there's ever a payload, right, whether in any of the convoy maps, if you stand on top of it, the squirrels will not touch you. So you jump up there. If you sit on top of it, you could be safe in that moment, and that is actually a nice little safe haven because you could easily just jump up on there and then you're alive. Now, it's best case scenario to destroy the squirrels as soon as possible. Once again, it's like the Hela. All hands on deck. You'll all shoot it. It just dies instantly. If you just think, hey, it's not my problem, well, now your whole team dies. Congratulations. So, and you could be included in that. So just be aware of that. If you're ever in any choke point, corridor, or anything like that, you need to get out of it pronto. Squirrel Girl's going to feast on you immensely, and you ideally want to play rooftops or fight from rooftops and try to get into a position to fight her from above her. So let's say we're talking about Tokyo, right? Tokyo, first point, is so strong for Squirrel Girl, both attack and defense. You need to try to fight her vertically. If you're a Hela, you jump from rooftop to rooftop. If you're a Star-Lord, you go top side. If you're a DPS, you try to take the high ground from her. You do not fight her on the low ground if you can, because she's just going to spam and spam and spam and kill you. Also, it's important to try to deliberately engage her, I would say, in the open, not behind a corridor or whatever. She could still stun you and outplay you, right? Especially if she's reasonably good. But she does have trouble with characters that get all up on her and fight her from multiple angles. She does have trouble fighting characters in open space. It could be a bit hard to hit her stun Squirrel up against, like, you know, tiny characters like Psylocke, for instance, or Star-Lord. And Star-Lord can really outplay her by flipping it as well. And then I would say that characters that just do more direct damage from range, you know, characters like Punisher, characters like Hela, these characters have a huge advantage against her on any of the maps that don't have choke points, because they just trade damage more effectively when they're not getting free value from, like, ricochets off the wall. Now, two characters I play in particular that have a terrible time up against Squirrel Girl is the Thing and Thor, so keep in mind that when you don't have any shield or any survivable abilities to keep you alive, you get double stunned by the squirrel and maybe triple stunned if she has the synergy with Spider-Man, and you're freaking dead. You're dead. Now, Star-Lord. We finally got into Star-Lord. It's a character that's super strong right now, especially in the meta. We're seeing a lot of Magneto bubble to Star-Lord. Star-Lord go in, press his E, disco around, get a whole bunch of ult charge, do that over and over again while providing a ton of pressure, and then build their ultimate really quickly and then ult, right? It's just a really powerful thing. One thing I will say is that when a Star-Lord pops ultimate, not every ult is created equal up against the Star-Lord ult, right? I talked about this when I talked about Cloak and Dagger, but you can't always keep everyone alive depending on the ultimate, and it's an important thing to kind of sync up the ultimate you're going to use with what the enemy want to use, and also think about how you're going to pop your ultimate in a way that's going to keep your team mostly alive. If your team is super spread and staggered up against a Star-Lord ultimate, it's not always reasonable to try to keep your team alive with the Star-Lord ultimate in the first place. Now, another thing is, Star-Lord can be pretty vulnerable in his ultimate if everyone's shooting at him or looking at him. So especially if you're someone with high amounts of burst damage midair, I would say that it's your job to try to turn the tables on a Star-Lord as quickly as possible, especially if you're not the primary target. This is true if you're freaking Namor. This is true if you're Hela. This is true if you're Adam Warlock. Whatever you are, trying to go at the Star-Lord and, like, force him to either use all of his flips or just die is a really big deal. Oftentimes, Star-Lords just get no pressure on them because no one even bothers to try to shoot the Star-Lord. Another thing is, like, a Magneto, I think is really great against Star-Lord, being able to deny the start of the ultimate, at least half of it, which is important because that's the most vital part where people are mostly out of position and they're not ready to deal with the Star-Lord ult. But it's a good idea to coordinate that, the popping of the Magneto ult into the focus of the Star-Lord ult. You could even say, hey team, when Star-Lord ults, I'm going to mag ult. Don't run, fight. Like, shoot the Star-Lord, right? Don't run, fight, right? It's a good habit to get into, something that y'all can do to shut it down and not trade a defensive ultimate as well. You would ideally not want your supports to pop ults in a panic when you're going to shut it down. Now, as far as the best characters up against the Star-Lord, there are a couple of really great characters against Star-Lord. Number one is Namor. Namor is very, very good up against Star-Lord, especially with the synergy. You're just going to be able to hit your spears really easily on him, and your squids are going to apply constant pressure, make it hard for him to duel you, especially if you take a slightly alternate angle from your squids where he can't clear you all with his E. Hela is one of the best characters up against Star-Lord, just being able to burst him down, a ton of freaking damage, especially if you're hitting your shots, whether you're stunning him or not, just being able to output a crazy amount of damage. Star-Lord kind of relies on being able to anticipate your damage patterns, and just the ability to burst him with so much damage from range out of nowhere is really hard for him to know when to properly flip to dodge. But similar to Mantis and Adam, make sure that you're extra aware of him when there's the resurrect. You just got to make sure that you're tracking his positions, where he's going, where he's resurrecting to, because, a Star-Lord's going to come right back. Whether he, traded with one person, got some value, pops right behind y'all, takes another duel. It's important to kind of keep in mind where he's at, where he's going, where he's rezzing, so that you're not caught off guard by this character. Now, Storm is the next character on this list, and Storm can be really, really strong, but there are some key vulnerabilities of the character we need to talk about. So for one, this character doesn't move vertically or horizontally particularly fast or well. This means if she's ever caught at a position, you could burst her down. And while good Storms play good positions, I will say that a lot of Storms get away with terrible positions where a Punisher, even without the team up, can burst her down, or, even a Psylocke or a Star-Lord. A lot lot of these characters that come from a different angle, you know, if the Storm is playing too low to the ground, you can one clip her super easily as Star-Lord. She's not running away from you. She's not turning on you. She's not stunning you. There's nothing she's really gonna do against you. This also means like certain tanks even can deal with her because she gets a little too low to the ground and she has a massive hitbox. Like Thor can actually press her and push her if she flies too close to the ground and apply a lot of pressure to her. Now, the thing about Storm that a lot of people want to know how to deal with is her ultimate, right? It pops up on you and it's just incredibly difficult to deal with. You feel like you have the defensive ultimate, right? So when she procs it, the first thing is she is vulnerable during that time. There is a window. I think a lot of Storms might feel a little too invincible there, but they can die and get it interrupted. It's happened to pretty much every Storm player. It's something to at least try for if you can. But once she procs it, it's a good idea that if you have a defensive ultimate, you call who's going to use it, you all group together, and you pop it right in response to her laying it down. Simultaneous to that, you want to do as much damage as possible so that she has to leave right away, or you potentially kill her. And there are some ways to kill her pretty reliably, I would say. There's a lot of combos of ultimates that you could use. Amplifier makes it really easy for the team to focus her down. Punisher plus Rocket team up with that shotgun could be good if you have a way to keep the Punisher alive, like through a defensive ultimate. But it's also possible to keep your team alive without the use of defensive ultimates at all. I think Soul Bond and you pocketing each other could be really, really great at keeping you alive. Loki Totem could be a great way to stay alive through partial of it as long as you're healing each other actively. And just 2 supports or 3 supports working together in tandem can have you survive this ultimate. And it's really an ultimate that has quite a bit of counterplay when the Storm just uses it expecting to wipe the entire enemy team. You could also spread in a way that the Storm is only going to be able to get one person. That's another way to go about it, where the Storm's going to get one person and then maybe put herself out of position enough. She has to push far enough to where she can get traded out and killed. So there are actually several ways to interact with it, surprising ways that you might not even need an ultimate for. Now, speaking of Punisher, we have the Punisher. Now, Punisher can be an absolute menace in the right hands, especially when we talk about the Rocket team up and his shotgun just outputting a crazy amount of damage. And I'm going to talk about specifically the Rocket synergy and the Rocket team up here. If the Rocket uses the synergy, you cannot press this. You cannot push this. You cannot engage this. I think way too many people fight when the Punisher synergy is up. The point of this is that you just wait it out. You don't fight. You don't engage. You literally back up. You wait. And it doesn't matter if you're a diver or a poker or whatever, whether he's whipping out that shotgun and full autoing you, or whether he's just, you know, shooting on your front line, you don't want to deal with this. And I'll also go as far as to say that you don't want to defensive ult into this or fight this. A lot of supports will defensive ult trying to fight a Punisher with the team up, and like an amplifier from Rocket, you can just die. You're just going to get shotgunned in the face 3 times and you're going to freaking die. Don't do this. Don't fight this. Disengage from Amplifier and disengage from the Rocket team up. Engage when they don't have it. That's as simple as it is, because Punisher is actually rather weak to things like dive. He has a big hitbox and he doesn't have any stuns, but when you fight him in that Amplifier, you really enable him. Another thing that you need to consider is that when he's in turret, it's all hands on deck to break the turret as soon as possible. Break it, destroy it before you push forward. Don't allow him to just sit in a turret free firing at your team. Break it, force him out. Then if you push forward, he Rocket team ups back up. Don't push forward yet. Now push forward. He's just a freaking, you know, just a guy with a gun. Then kill him, okay? Then kill him. Kill him afterwards. Don't play into his strengths like so many players do. Now, also, you can look and see where they're throwing the team up. Sometimes Rockets will throw it too far forward, actually, and you as a tank can push past it a little bit to prevent the Punisher from even using it. And if they push it too far back or put it too far back, you just back up and give space, right? So you got to make sure that the Rocket and Punisher are on point. A lot of times people are filling the Rocket, they have no idea what the hell they're doing, and they're not placing it right for the Punisher based on how the fight will progress. Now, the overall best tank for the Punisher, to deal with the Punisher, is definitely Magneto. Infinite damage absorption, so you don't really care about the Rocket team up as much. You can poke him around the corner, so you can constantly, you know, peek out the corner, apply damage, peek out the corner, stun, apply damage, and keep doing that even during, you know, the synergy, because you just are not taking a lot of damage during that. And you have your ultimate that can literally just, you know, shut it down, deny it, eat his ultimate, throw it right back at him. So it's just really, really good up against the Punisher. I would also say that Thor can be reasonable not attacking him during the the rocket synergy, but outside of that, just being able to jump on him from a different angle, and Thor Force typically like ring around the rosy with him. He has a big hitbox, so he's easy to burst down. He's not the hardest to kill on Thor. And I would also say joint dives in general. Any amount of joint dives onto this character, he could just get melted, and you know, this could be from any characters, any hypermobility characters. Psylocke in particular is amazing against him. He set up in a turret, you just burst it from behind. And remember, during his ultimate, he can only target one person. So if you're someone with long distance burst or any burst at all, you can look for a play against the Punisher, especially if he's really greedy and trying to go for a bit too much. He's rounding the corner. You dink him a couple times as Hela. He's going a little bit too far in front of his team. You one-clip him as freaking Star-Lord. There's ways to shut him down and poke him down, but if he's like being backed up by his entire team and he's like in a defensive ultimate or something like that, then typically you just want to completely disengage and then move forward from there. The thing. My favorite character right now, and an absolute house, but there's a couple of important characters that could shut you down and some notable things to be afraid of. I kind of don't even want to leak right now, but I think it's pretty important to know if you want to shut down the thing. So first off, don't play double shield against this character. This character's super good at farming through shields. So the tanks that he really doesn't want to play against, first off, he does not want to play against Groot. Groot is like the #1 ban for the thing. Being able to wall off the thing during his retreat, he can't break the walls very reliably, and he has no vertical mobility unless the team is like directly above him. So yeah, Groot is just amazing at denying his exits and just basically killing him. So that's a really difficult one. Peni Parker is also a great character up against the thing. Just constantly web him over and over and over again, prevent him from disengaging. And something that's super underrated is any amount of crowd control onto the thing during the mid-fight when he's poking and fighting. Things kind of operate on this very specific balance between being able to pin in and get that extra bit of health and then pin out and get the 30% damage reduction. If they just get randomly slept or frozen on the front line and then bursted, sometimes it just messes with everything and they just get killed. A lot of things will overextend, and I will tell you from personal experience, getting stunned on the front line for long periods of time is just not great. And remember, you can't get pulled in like by Bucky, but you can still get stunned in place by Bucky's hook. You can still get frozen. You can still get slept. There's a lot of things that can still interact with you, and it's very annoying for the thing when you're expecting to be able to barely get out, and oftentimes on the thing you're kind of relying on your abilities to be getting out like when you want to get out. Now there are a couple other annoying characters as well. I will say that Punisher with the Rocket team up or Bucky with the Rocket team up, just a large outpouring of damage at you can be kind of frustrating. Yes, you can bait it out and wait it out, but you know, during your engagements when this gets thrown down, you're just going to tank so much damage, and yeah, you're just going to kind of fall over. Also, Squirrel Girl, being able to stun you over and over again and just output a crazy amount of damage and never miss on you. It's a lot. It's a lot of freaking damage. And another surprising one is characters like Psylocke and Star-Lord just constantly poking into you in a way that you can't interact with. You can't ever, you know, chase a Star-Lord, a Psylocke, especially if they're on the high ground. It's just impossible for you to do anything directly about them, so they can be rather annoying characters to fight just in general. I'll also say that the thing has one of the fastest building ultimates in the game, so expect him to have it, but luckily for you, you have almost on every single character time to defensive ultimate in response to the thing's ultimate, so, you know, you could just learn ult in response to getting slammed or whatever, keep your team alive. Now, next is Thor, a character that I also play quite a bit, a very strong character at contesting DPS on certain angles, characters like Moon Knight, characters that are isolated. But what are the things that Thor is the weakest against? What are the things he can't do anything about? So, first off, Thor hates Bucky, okay? He hates this freaking character. Yeah, I mean, it's getting pulled in, and, you know, CC'd multiple times. Yes, you could play around them if you have another good tank. Yes, you could find ways to still get value. Is it annoying as hell? Absolutely. 100%. Yes, very freaking annoying. Now, one thing about Thor that Thor mains don't want you to know is that all of them will set up their ultimate by going in, dropping a bubble, and then popping their ultimate, right? But there is actually a window of interruption during the start of that where Thor can get his ult canceled, and it can get canceled by anything that wants to move him. So this means an Invisible Woman push, a Hawkeye freaking swipe back, actually anything can just cancel your ultimate and shut it down. And it's actually pretty telegraphed when the Thor has ult, you know he hasn't used it in a while, and he does that specific thing, flies into you, bubbles, literally just respond instantly with any of those abilities, which you're probably going to do anyways, but note that that's what he's trying for, and you're going to shut down a lot of his ultimates. Now, also, one of the things about Thor that's important to note when you can punish him is when he pops his awakening, yes, he's outputting a lot of damage, but he's stuck in the entire awakening where he's throwing lightning bolts for the entire duration of it, meaning he can't run away. So he's stuck there, and if he ever pops it at the wrong time, he's just kind of a sitting duck there, and he can't leave, and after he's done with it, he's not going to have hardly any movement abilities. He's going to have like one dash away. So knowing that, you can punish him if he uses it a bit too aggressively, especially if you could endure out the storm, then you can punish him after the fact. Now we have Venom, the king of die. Venom can be very difficult to deal with, oftentimes because he has so much freaking health total. He's just really hard to kill. And of course, all the essentials that we'll talk about are important to deal with him. All of the anti-dive threats, every single one of them, whatever you could whip out. And this includes characters like Wolverine as well, Peni Parker, Namor, Bucky. Those characters are all amazing. Even someone like Squirrel Girl, anything that can stun him multiple times and basically have him overstay his welcome to the point where now he has to be really careful about staying too long, and then maybe he's not just doing all that much. But when you back Venom up with multiple other threats, that's when he gets more and more difficult. I will say that the cycle of Venom coming in, and then there's a key moment where the Venom is looking up and looking around, trying to get out. That's the best time to stun him. But next up, the character that a lot of you have been waiting for, Winter Soldier. Yeah, I mean, if you have figured it out already, you can't counter this guy. He just shits on the entire roster. No, I'm just kidding. There are ways to shut down Bucky. There are some good characters that shut him down. Let's talk about what those exactly are. So the first thing is characters that outrange him, and there are characters that do. I think Hela and Hawkeye are two of the best characters at denying him because they just get to spam from longer ranges than him and constantly threaten lethal on him and his team, and he can't really do anything about it. So yeah, these characters are phenomenal against him. Really hard to play though. Mechanically difficult to play, more difficult to play than Bucky is, but these characters will absolutely roll a Bucky over and over again. They're very good. Another character that's really good against Bucky is actually Magneto. Just being able to zone him away, you can bubble off the people he hooks, you can deny a lot of his burst damage, and you can bubble to cleanse his, the thing that he puts on the mark, he puts on people with his ultimate. That's all great against Bucky to deny ultimate value and prevent the chain off. And, of course, just being able to poke him and stun him in the neutral is just great. And then the thing is surprisingly good. Yes, Winter Soldier, if he has the Rocket team-up, can be okay against you, just outputting a lot of damage. And yes, he can still stall you in place, but there's few tanks that can press a Bucky like the Thing can. You just get to run up on him, you get to stun him, and one of the biggest weaknesses of Bucky is he has not really great mobility. So the fact he can't push you around, he can't move you into his team, and when he really doesn't want to be pushed upon and stunned in place, you can do that. That makes you fairly good against this character. Now, you might be like, Mills, okay, what about the support roster? What am I supposed to play against him? And I would really say that any support that just fights from range outside of his effective range, like Adam and Mantis are actually particularly good against Bucky. They trade damage more favorably from range than him most of the time. And in general, one of the best tips I can give you up against Bucky is that you always need to consider him to have more health than he does. I think a lot of times Bucky's get more value than they should because people aren't playing around his cooldowns, they're playing around his existing health. They say, hey, the Bucky's low, let's all in jump him, use all of our abilities, jump around the building and go chase him. Well, he actually has like 100 extra health than that. He has more health than you think because you got to think about it. His health are tied to his abilities. That's where his health comes from. The shields come from. So you need to identify Bucky's weaknesses or strength, not necessarily based on his health, but based on his cooldowns. Does he have hook? He's going to have that every 8 seconds. Does he have his pin? That's even a longer cooldown. If he doesn't have these, he's uniquely vulnerable, and those are the moments that you can really press a Bucky. And also, you need to generally play around that hook cycle. It's something that you can play around intentionally. Call when he has it, communicate, look at the Bucky. Don't assume that he doesn't have it and get hooked by it. There's a lot of ways to block it, deny it, depending on the tank you are, so keep that in mind. Now, last up is Wolverine, a character that you should probably just ban. No, I'm just kidding. There are characters that are good against Wolverine. I think the Thing is probably the best tank against Wolverine because you just can't get gripped. You can stun him, and you can have people follow up and burst him down from the stun. He's not going to pull you, push you, ult you. Now, if you are just standing there and taking damage from him, he will still shred you. And he's generally just good against tanks because he does damage based on max HP. So you don't really want to fight him directly. On top of that, characters like Magneto can be reasonable, especially when played alongside someone like the Thing. But you have to be really careful about how you're utilizing your bubble. You have to be pretty patient with your bubble. Not necessarily bubbling the Thing as much, saving it for yourself so that you don't get gripped up and pulled out of position, especially with that rocket jump that's going to pull you across the damn map. Now, on top of that, Invisible Woman might be the best character up against Wolverine. Not the easiest to play perfectly, but being able to deny his grip or push him off your teammates can really just be a lifesaver, be amazing. But I will say that one of the things about Wolverine is that he's going to be able to ult your team out of the Invisible Woman ult. So that's something that you got to be a little careful of. A good Wolverine will see and wait for you to pop Invisible ult, grip you or grip someone else, pull y'all out, and then kill y'all even in spite of that. So you got to be extra cautious of that and be ready to deny him or, save your team or bail your team out after the fact. Now, there are some characters that interact in interesting ways with Wolverine, like Captain America kind of cares the least. Both of y'all don't really care about each other. Both of y'all are like two ships drifting by each other, neither of y'all fighting each other. It happens all the time. Y'all can't really interact very favorably with each other. I will also say that characters that can stun him, of course, keep him in place are all good. High burst damage is good. So once again, Winter Soldier, Squirrel Girl, Namor with his slow squids, all these characters can be really reasonable against Wolverine. The most important thing though, communicate when freaking his passive is triggered. If your team doesn't know, then they're not going to know whether he's a high priority in that moment or not. And it also is a bit demoralizing when everyone's just constantly shooting at this guy and they feel like they're making no progress. It's good to let everyone know, hey, we've gotten through this one thing. Now we can actually kill this motherfucker. Anyways, I hope you learned something in this video. I know I talked about a lot of different things, but if you have any specific questions on how you should go about dealing with certain characters as your main, let me know in the comments down below and I'll try to answer as many as I can. And if you have any other special tips to shutting down certain characters that you use in your games that help you, let the community know down below so we can all learn from each other. Thank you all so much for coming by. I hope you enjoyed it here. Remember to check out 30 days of free coaching in the links down below, and I'll see you next time.